Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Gaur Hari Bo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Shri Prahlad Lakshmi Nrsingadeva ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. key is still in critical condition. Good evening, everyone. Nama Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Manchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This evening we are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is translation and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And we are broadcasting from Singhachalam, Germany, on, what's today? 11th of May? 10th of May? 11th. In the year 2023, according to our modern calendar. And we're reading from the 15th chapter, the beginning verse. Let's invoke Lord Vasudeva first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, chapter 15, the Yoga of the Supreme Person, Purushottama Yoga. And this is verse number 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Urdvamulam Adashakam Urdvamulam Adashakam Ashvatam prahur avyayam. Ashvatam prahur avyayam. Chandangsi yasya parnani. Chandangsi yasya parnani. Yastang veda saveda vit. Yastam veda saveda vit. Shri Bhagavan uvacha urdvamulam madashakam ashvatam prahuravyayam chandangsi yasya parnani yastang veda saveda vit. Chandangsi yasya parnani Stambeda saveda vit. Ladies? Shri Bhagavan uvacha urdva moolam adashakam shashvatam prahur avyayam chandangsi yasya parnani yastam veda saveda vit. Shri Bhagavan vacha urdvamulam adashakam avyayam chandangsi yasya karna yastam veda saveda vit. Okay. Let's see. Kishori Kunda, Übersetzung für dich. Oh. Uvacha. Urdvamulam madashakam. Ashvatam prahuravyayam. Chandangsi yasya parnani yastam veda saveda vit. Oh, okay. Then you're going over there. Gibt's deutsche Übersetzung? Björn, okay. Gut. Right. Shri Bhagavan uvacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Urdvamulam, with roots above, Adha, downward, Shakam, branches, Ashvatam, a banyan tree. Prahu is said. Avyayam, eternal. Chandangsi, the Vedic hymns. Yasya, of which. Parnani, the leaves. Yaha, anyone. Anyone who. Tam, that Veda knows. Saha, he, Vedavit, the knower of the Vedas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Veda." One thing strikes me as I just read the translation is we have Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, so the Lord is saying, this is how it is. But what is he saying? He's saying, it is said. Who says? It is said. Prahu. So these are both forms of the same verb, vach, uvacha. From vach we get uvacha for the singular past, and then prahu, prahus is, I believe it's literally they say. I think it's third person, but with pra it's emphasis. It's firmly said. There's no doubt. And, that's all from Vach. We have a prayer to Nrsingadev. Vagisha yasya varane lakshmim yasya chavakshasi yasya ste hridaye samvit tam Nrsinga maham bhaje. Vagisha, Vag Isha, the Lord of Vach, the Lord of, can be either the goddess speech or speech, the Lord of speech or the Lord of the goddess of speech. So, okay. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree. What's the word for banyan tree? Ashvata, yeah. I always remember this one. There's lots of banyan trees in Hong Kong, but there's one famous banyan tree in Chennai, South Chennai, in the land of the Theosophical Society, the Adyar Library. They have a big open space land, and on that land there's one area, I think they say it's more than 1 acre of land, and they've fenced it off so that there's no damage. But there's one banyan tree, and it covers this huge area, and it has roots going down and up and down and up, so you can't really tell where's the beginning and where's the end of this tree, which is a point that will come, I think it's in verse 3. Okay. Roots upward, urdhvamulam, branches downward, adashakam. And it's imperishable, avyaya. So there's 3, we can say adjectives. So the noun is ashvatam. There's a tree. What kind of a tree? Ashvata tree. And what kind of an ashvata tree? One with urdhvamulam, with roots going up. and with branches going down, and it is avyayam. It is perpetual. Moreover, chandangsi yasya parnani, of which yasya is possessive correlative, of which there are parnani, which means leaves, parna, parnani. What sort of leaves? Chandangsi, leaves which are hymns, hymn leaves. And then, yaha tam veda saha vedavid. You could add, it's sort of implied, the verb asti, is. So one, and tam, so it's ashvatam, and then this pronoun tam has the same ending. That's kind of a hint that it's going to refer to ashvatam. So that ashvata tree, yaha tam, one who knows that, yes tam veda, one who knows that, saha, that person, veda vit asti, that person is a knower of Veda. That's all. It's quite simple and straightforward. All right, purport. After the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It's explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. Okay. In the second chapter, there's a verse. Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschita vedavada rata parta nanya astiti vadina. Krishna's kind of making fun of those who are thinking that Vedas are everything. Veda vada rata. And he's kind of, you know the word sneer, to sneer? He's kind of like, he's kind of minimizing the value of the Vedas, because he says, yam imam pushpitam vacham. They're pushpita, they're flowered. They sound really impressive, the Vedas. The Rig Veda hymns, some of them are really quite charming. And it's quite amazing poetry, and some of it is so amazing you can't understand what it's saying. But it can be quite charming. Anyway, Krishna is saying, na anyat asti iti vadin. There are people who think that the Veda is everything. And here, Prabhupada's explaining that those who know, who are Krishna conscious, they already know the Veda. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end, and for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. Okay, so that's why Chandangsi, Yasya Parnani, the hymns, the chandas. The hymns are referred to as chandas, and the word chandas can also mean Sanskrit prosody, the study of the poetic meters in Sanskrit. It's a whole universe in itself. People study about Sanskrit poetry, the different meters. There's 7 main meters in the Veda, and then but there's a lot more than that. Some, I've read, there's a catalog of 600 meters, and they elaborate in so many ways. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, we mainly have what is it called? We have Anushtup meter and one other. Anyone know what it is? One other type of meter. The next verse is going to be in a different. It's called Trishtup. Trishtup. Another meter is Gayatri. Gayatri is a meter. Specifically, it has, it's similar to Anushtup. Anushtup has 8 syllables per line, but it has 4 lines. Gayatri has 8 syllables per line, and it has 3 lines. So if anyone asks you, if you get caught somewhere and challenged, you will know. Yeah, there's others. Chintamani prakara satma sukapa vriksha laksha briteshu surabhira vipalayantam. That's Vasanta Tilaka, it's called, the ornament of spring. And that's, I think, 14 syllables in a line. But it's not just numbers of syllables in a line, it's also relations of short and long. So, what is it called? Lagu and Guru, Rasva, Dirga. The other one that's a lot of fun is Shardula Vikridita, which literally means the prancing of a tiger. Shardula Vikridita. So, Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro Prema Mridam Bonidi Shardula Vikridita Dira Dira Jana Priyo Priyakaro Nirmatsaro Pujito. That's all chandas, but also the hymns are called chandas. As opposed to, or in contrast to, bhasha, and this is not bhashar, this is bhasha. Bhasha means ordinary language, our daily use of language, that is bhasha. So, Braja Bhasha is just the language of Braj. Bengali Bhasha. And that's different, not to be mixed up with Bhasya. Bhasya is a commentary, that's usually a Sanskrit commentary, on some text, any sort of text commentary. So Prabhupada calls his Bhasya purports. Right. So the Vedic, what are the leaves of this Ashvata tree? The Vedic hymns. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward. Why? Because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. This process of extrication, means getting out of something, should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement, and up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. The best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. What's the basic principle of devotional service? You're giving a purport to what Prabhupada is saying. Yes. The basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Prabhupada is getting a little bit ahead here, because that's going to be explained in further verses, although I don't think it explicitly mentions fruit, but it does mention karma. Okay. Now, there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward, but there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire. just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. Now, at this point, before I finish the purport, I'm going to wonder aloud, and maybe you can help me out. In the verse, one of the features of the Ashvata being described is that it is avyaya. But the tree being described is the reflection. And we just read the reflection is temporary. Is that a contradiction or? Yes, Björn.
What comes to my mind, maybe if you throw a stone into the water, then you can see the reflection, but the real tree is still standing.
Yes. Okay. It seems that Krishna is sort of blending two things together in this verse. Yes, there's the eternal tree, and there's the reflection, and he seems to be talking about both in one, so to say. Another thing one might say, well, what's the problem? This it's just a reflection. So, number one, all I have to know is that it's a reflection. And then that's enough, and then I can be free, because I know it's not the real one. But Prabhupada is saying we have to know this tree thoroughly. It's like we have to study this tree. But it's going to say in verse 3 that we should chop it down with the weapon of detachment. Interesting. Okay. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. You know the word replica? No? Mm-hmm. No. It's like an exact copy. It's like a facsimile, yeah. Yeah. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, then the three gunas. Then the 5 gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dashendriya, mind, etc. Prabhupada is a little bit blending here, Sankhya with Vedanta, but okay. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees. And the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is the perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. And that is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen, but the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. It sounds a bit Platonic, doesn't it? Platon, had this idea of the original forms. There are forms in some absolute world, and these are reflected, diffused, whatever we experience in this world. But the original forms are elsewhere. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. Okay. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. And so ends Prabhupada's purport to this verse. When there's a longer purport like this, I'm tempted to end there and say, so, are there any questions? Any comments? Yes.
Going back to the Theosophical Society in Chennai, so the reason I was a member.
Maybe wait until we get the microphone.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I would like to make a short comment about the Theosophical Society in Chennai. In the time I was there in Madras.
You've been there.
I was myself for 3 years a member of that Theosophical Society between the year 1969 1972. So I would like to add something. The banyan tree, yes, and also the park. Actually, the old park has a very strong, I will dare to use the word more than the word energy. There is a strong magnetism in that place. And for a good reason is that Blavatsky at the time in 1975, when it has been founded, they chose that specific place in 1975 because some people can see through the astral plane, actually. It was a strong magnetism coming from the ground, from that place. So it was, and it is a very powerful place, definitively. Last time I was there is only 3-4 years ago. I just come back also 3 months ago from India. So Krishnamurti actually was very well known until the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
They won't put that man as a guru of the place. But he left the Theosophical Society.
Yes,
he was only 19 years old, which was actually, unfortunately, a big blow for the Theosophical Society. That's that is what I wanted to add. But myself, I also practice meditation in that park because it's a special place with a young Indian boy in that time, something like 10 years ago. So, but the unfortunate thing to say it is in that magnetism coming from the ground, it's not only good but bad energies, I have to say. It is known also. It's mixed. There's good and bad energies. Yeah. Not only good energy.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry to add to my...
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
But since you're mentioning that place, I also visited there in 2017. We did some filming there. We just filmed a couple of short scenes for this documentary we made called India's Book of Wisdom. It's about the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can find it on YouTube. Just search India's Book of Wisdom and you'll find. And we filmed a little bit there, but it was a bit of touch and go because it wasn't exactly. We didn't have any formal permission to film. And sometimes in India they're very nervous about that. So we had to kind of, quick, okay, now, do it, before anyone comes. Anyway. Yeah. They have a nice library. The Adyar library is quite famous. Indological library. Yes.
Thank you very much for the explaining. Guru Maharaj, I would like to ask you, may you could please say some words to this topic and connected to the so-called like spiritual part of this tree we hear, but somehow it's for myself not so clear what is this or where is this or how it exists or what is this part of the spiritual tree of this aspect?
Well, first I think we want to understand what's called an extended metaphor. So in the 13th chapter we got an extended metaphor of what is the phenomenal world, to use fancy term, with a field, a Ksetra. So many different aspects, elements, senses, the essentially body, but also other features are there. And all of that is described as a Ksetra, to contrast it with Kshetrajna, the knower of the field. And then, what is it? Kshetrajna chapi bhutani. There's another knower of the field who knows all fields, so it's making these distinctions. There's the field, there's the knower of the field, and there's the supersoul who knows all the fields. So it's all, after reading that, you're not supposed to go out, where is that field, where is that field? Well, it's a metaphor. Similarly, this is a metaphor. So we don't go, oh, now I'm liberated from the material tree, now where's the spiritual tree? I don't think that's exactly the point. The emphasis is on the entanglement. We get entangled in an illusion, which is like being entangled. So it's like, it gives something we're familiar with. We're familiar with trees. We might not be familiar with ashwatha trees, but in India, people know, in East and South Asia. So otherwise, what's the spiritual world like? Well, Lord Brahma says in Brahma Samhita, what is it? Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataramo Druma Bhumis Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Shri Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Paramapitata Cha Paramana Cha. Like that. And that's another meter, by the way. I don't know the name of it, but it's the same one as Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatu Me. It has 4 short syllables at the end. So that's describing the spiritual world too, where there's Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpa Taravo, the trees, of the trees, they're wish-fulfilling trees. Kalpa Vriksha Kalpa Tarava. Nice, those trees we want. What is it? Bhumi. Okay. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpa Taravo Bhumis Chintamani. The bhumi, the earth, the ground, is Chintamani. Ganamayi Toyam Amritam. The Toya, the water. What is the water in the spiritual world? It's Amrita. It's nectar. Nice. And then the whole, the description of, there are descriptions of Goloka, descriptions of Vaikuntha, but I don't know of any description of the original tree from which this is the reflection. Maybe there is. There's a lot of description of Vrindavan's trees. When we were in Govardhan in February, we had this nice retreat, and we made a pilgrimage. We took a bus to Biharvan, and there we met with Dinabandhu Prabhu. And Dinabandhu spoke very nicely. I was speculating that he would speak about cows, because where we went, one beautiful ashram of the Nimbarka sadhus, Nimbarka Sampradaya, they have about 2,000 cows. They just let them wander in this forest. Very beautiful. I thought he would talk about the cows. He didn't talk about the cows. He talked about the trees. And it was amazing how much he knows about Vrindavan's trees. Different kinds of trees, and when they blossom, and what kind of blossoms, and what kind of... And also birds. He was talking a lot of birds. And then I asked him later, how is it you know all this? And he said, well, when he was living at Vrindakunda, when they were developing Vrindakunda in the early days, he was living there, I think, for a couple of years. And he just got to know all of this about the trees and the birds and the nature. Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur talks a lot about the trees in Vrindavan. Yeah. Bashar.
Maharaj, one thing comes to my mind while comparing the reflection of the tree, the material world to the reflection of the tree. How much Prabhupada used to give analogies, describing some spiritual truths and with material analogies. So I asked myself the question when you said this, when you read from the purport the principle that to detach from the material something, I forgot, I'm paraphrasing now, and develop attachment to the devotional service.
Mm-hmm.
So
material activities, spiritual activities.
So in our process, do we focus on both parallel, or do we try to simply develop taste for the spiritual aspects? Because a lot of times I hear descriptions from the spiritual about the spiritual world, how it looks like, the nature, and so on, but somehow it simply doesn't leave any impression. Meaning it doesn't get it doesn't stuck in the
stick.
brain, stick to the brain. So could you say something?
Well, one thing we get from hearing about spiritual reality is that it's both similar to and different from what we experience. And that's kind of what the point Prabhupada is making in the purport, part of what he's saying, is and kind of that's the whole idea of the tree analogy is. So we, again, take the tree. We know about trees, and then he extends the analogy by saying, just like you look at a tree on the opposite bank of some lake, and you'll see the reflection, and it's upside down, and so on. So we might imagine where you look across and for some reason you can't see the actual tree. All you see is the reflection. But the reflection lets you know that there is a real tree there, and the reflection gives you some idea of what that tree would be like. It's, instead of being like a reflection, it's something solid, something substantial. So, of course, we can say, well, at the end of the day, we don't have experience of that. We only have experience of what we have here. We have the experience of the world through our senses, and all of this is limited, all of this is temporary, and so it doesn't give us doesn't really give us access to the spiritual. Well, we're aiming to understand that there is a process by which the senses, our present senses, can actually become purified so that we can actually experience with the senses. Atah Shri Krishna namadi na bhavet grahyam indriyahi sevanmukehi jihvado svayameva spurati adha. Yeah. Beginning with the tongue. So the verse says, na bhavet grahyam, we cannot grasp with our senses. And then it turns around and says, seva unmukehi jihvado, beginning with the jihva, the tongue. Seva unmukha, by sort of turning our attention, attending to seva, to service. Then svayam eva spurati. Spurati means becomes manifest, becomes directly experienced. I think it means like that. And therefore, we want to sort of suspend our disbelief, where we think, no, everything around, it's just material. That's our disbelief. We want to try to suspend that and say, well, what if it's actually spiritual? Could it be that it's spiritual? Could it be that actually everything I see, hear, taste, touch is Krishna? And what if I could allow what if my senses could become innocent instead of always being extensions of my desire, my motivations, and whatnot? What if my senses could really just be instrument of Krishna's senses? And then I would see everything, experience everything as Krishna. But beginning with the tongue. Does that make sense? Yes, I think you're first. No? What is your name?
I'm Brian.
Brian.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Here in the part of the purport, Prabhupada says, one who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study.
Yeah.
So I was, so if the tree represents somehow our entanglement in the material world caused by our desire, so I'm wondering what Prabhupada is meaning here. So does that mean that we should try to get the knowledge of how we are entangled, or more like realize deeply that it is only a perverted reflection of the variegatedness of the spiritual world, or there is other meaning? Or?
No, it's a very good question, and I was kind of thinking that as I was reading it. It seems you could take it both ways. In one sense, it's like a hopeless case. The whole point of the analogy is that it's such material world is such an entangling place that you never are going to figure out how you're entangled. You're never going to get there. As soon as you think you've figured out one thing, there'll be something else there to catch you. It could be, when Prabhupada is speaking about analysis, he's taking the notion of Sankhya. Because the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of Sankhya in the Bhagavad Gita. And Sankhya, one way to understand it, it means analysis. And what's the analysis? Essentially, it's an analyzing to understand the difference between the body and the self, by analyzing different elements of the not-self, analyzing the constituents. That's basically what Sankhya is. The three modes of nature. Krishna talks quite a lot about the modes of nature. That's all Sankhya. So one could take it that to analyze the material world means study these aspects of Bhagavad Gita. And also at the end of chapter 18, it's one of those many verses I always wanted to learn and never did. Krishna says, studying this Bhagavad Gita is using your intelligence. Yes, adyeshate chaye imang dharmyang samvadam avayoho jnana yagyena tenaham ishtasyam iti me mati. And I declare that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours, worships me by his intelligence. Prabhupada translates that way. The key is jnana yagyena, by the yagya of jnana. And here jnana means knowledge, but it can also be taken as, analysis, study, sort of. Ishtasyamiti. Me mati. Krishna's being humble. He says, this is my opinion. This is my opinion. Yes, I know I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but I also have an opinion. So that may be one way to understand it, but as you're pointing out, the whole thing here is to say this is endlessly entangling, and the solution is going to be given in verse number 3. Asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. Just cut through it. Don't try to figure it out. Just take a leap of faith and let it go. Let it go. Does that make sense? Ramananda.
Short comment to Bashar's question and your explanation.
Yeah.
I had once experience with some interreligious dialogue person who came here to visit the temple.
Yeah.
And he's from a Christian background,
Uh-huh.
evangelic, and he was standing in front of the altar.
Ah.
And me, of a short while, he looked and he became very grave. And when we turned out, I thought that he's somehow disturbed by, seeing this thing, could be whatever goes in his mind. And then he said to me, it was like looking in the living room of God. And this was for me, like, as you said, like if we can, or as I understood it, if we can turn out our reasoning and just with innocent senses, like this person, he didn't know what to expect, whatever, but he had somehow this revelation, what was for me like, wow. So really, like as Prabhupada says, an altar or a picture, just like show windows of the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So this was one thing when I think if Spirit wants to reveal, then he can do it to a worthy person or whatever.
Even to a Protestant Christian. Because usually the Protestants are the most, they tend to be quite iconoclastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Good. Okay. Anything else, ladies?
I had a question attached.
Sure.
Something else, but I'm not sure if somebody else has
Go
a
ahead.
question. There was in the morning we had a small discussion about the Vedas, and as also described here in the verse, the flowery words of the Vedas. So we touched this topic. So one person actually in the Bhagavad class of Munir Nagan, one person in the chat asked, kind of why is it that in the Bhagavatam, different things are explained, like you want to have this result, you worship this demigod, you want to have this result, have this demigod, or in the end of each chapter, you have like a benediction, what seems like a material benediction, but in the beginning of Bhagavatam, it claims that it cuts everything material out of it, and then still such things come on the way. And we had some kind of discussion, maybe you have an opinion about that. Awesome. Light.
Well, one point we might consider is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's point about the Bhagavatam being all-purpose, in the sense, he says, it brings together all essentials for everyone, and he spoke quite with a kind of flourish, or he wrote in this one essay that if you have the Bhagavatam, you don't need anything else. He says all the other Vedic literature, it could be just burned, like he compared it to the library of Alexandria. It was burned. So, and his point is that whatever is essential, whatever is actually valuable, is there in the Bhagavatam, including, we can say, some attractions for persons with some material aspirations. Because it will say, yes, you can have this and this and this if you do this and that, but then it always comes to the conclusion, but if you want, the real perfection of life, then it is to hear and chant and remember the Lord, and so on. Isn't it? So it's within a context. The Palashrutis are there, the ends of stories telling some fruit you get. Okay, you'll be motivated. It's a bit like giving the analogy of inducing a child to take medicine by giving them some or sugar coating, right, the medicine. So some of that is there also in the Bhagavatam. Yeah.
I would like to ask something to the discussion. I was reading sixth canto a few days ago, and actually was also according this explanation of karma kanda activity or worship demigods, sometimes Shukadeva Goswami is testing Maharaj Parikshit.
Yeah.
And usually this is also possible.
Yes, in the beginning of Canto 6, right, when he's talking about the bathing of the elephant. Yeah, he's testing, and the king passes the test because he understands, no, this can't be the answer. This can't be how to, because the problem was from the end of Canto 5, the description of the hellish planets. How can people avoid that? He says, well, yeah, they can do austerities, they can do penances, people can do lots of things, they'll be purified. Parikshit Maharaj says, not enough. And then he says, what is the famous verse? Anyway, by practicing bhakti yoga, then all of this is dispelled like fog is dispelled by the sun. Nihara iva bhaskara. Yeah, I don't remember the beginning of the verse. Yeah, testing. Good point. Yes, Akila Prabhu. Microphone. Mic.
When you talked about the term jump of faith, I was thinking, well, we know how right the situation is in Krishna consciousness, and we try to practice it, but still we are not really surrendered. So how could we practice this leap of faith that brings us forward, overcoming these doubts that are still there, although we know it's right?
I know it's right, but I can't do it. Well, it's, as Prabhupada would so many times say, it's a gradual process. Be interesting to do a little Veda-based search, how many times Prabhupada uses the word gradual and gradually. And then we wonder, okay, how gradual? How slow, how fast? I want it to go faster. And there's no specific. Prabhupada would say sometimes you can become fully Krishna conscious in 1 second. Okay. So your question is how to keep going even though we're not getting that? Or how to make that leap? How to make the leap? Well, practice little leaps. Little leaps of faith. Yeah, sometimes it's good that we do things a little out of the ordinary, out of our usual, what's the word? Our comfort zone. To step outside our comfort zone. Take up little challenges that come our way. I think if we're a little awake to it, we can appreciate, oh, Krishna's giving me an opportunity here to take a step outside my comfort zone. Okay, maybe I should do it. And then each time we do that, that brings some reassurance, some new impetus, and it prepares us. We can take bigger leaps. Because one day we're going to have to take one really big leap, right? Yeah. Little leaps. Jumping, leaps, jumps. Yeah. Right, okay, let's take a leap back home, back to Godhead. A leap of faith. What do we have to lose? Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, was famously making Pascal's wager, which was that it's more reasonable to bet, if you're going to gamble, about whether or not God exists, then you're in better position if you gamble that God does exist than if he does not exist. Because if you gamble that he does exist and then it turns out that he does not exist, you haven't actually lost anything. But if you gamble that he does not exist and it turns out that he does exist, then you're in big trouble. Then you're really the loser. Yeah, so let's chant Hare Krishna. We will not be the loser. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Grantara Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Premanande. That was a big jump from chapter 1 to chapter 15. 2 days ago we had